Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I worked at Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola. It's the largest maximum security prison in the United States. Over 18,000 acres of farmland bordered by the Mississippi River and forest. Most people in here aren't ever getting out. Life sentences, sometimes 2 or 3 stacked. My job was B-line tier officer, Block B, High Security Isolation Wing. We called it the shakedown block. Concrete, steel, and silence. You don't get promoted to that post unless you've been around. I started corrections back in 2010, worked my way up through Gen Pop, the yard towers, and eventually got the high-risk post in 2022. That Friday morning, things felt off. Nothing dramatic, just a slow unease. Fewer trucks on the highway to the east when I turned off Highway 61. Less chatter on the radio. Fewer officers at the checkpoint near the front gate. Captain Ruiz was already arguing with the comms officer when I clocked in. Something about Baton Rouge PD calling for National Guard support overnight. Rumors of riots. That wasn't new. Summer in Louisiana always brings heat and tension. Angola's like a small town with fences, so we didn't jump at news from outside. We had our own problems. We had a scheduled cell rotation on B-Tier. That meant I'd be walking with keys and restraints all day, rotating lifers one cell down to prevent them from nesting. I did my checks like always. Call sign, verify badge, log clipboard. The only warning I got was a half joke from Officer Dewey over coffee. He said, "You hear about the bite cases in the hospitals? It's like a bath salts rerun." I rolled my eyes. He always had something. Last week it was killer wasps in Texas. By 1000 hours, things were already breaking down. Comms went dark. Phones had that endless tone when you dialed out. Our internet terminals locked. The emergency net inside the tower crackled with static, then froze. Warden Fletcher ordered a full lockdown by 10:30. He called it external security breach, and that phrase meant we sealed the compound. No in, no out, unless authorized at the Sally Port. That hadn't happened in my 13 years. We assumed it was a riot or maybe some big storm. I still thought that until the chopper passed overhead, National Guard bird, low altitude, west to east, no call into the tower. Then I saw the plume. South of the river bend, past the tree line, a column of smoke rising like someone lit the forest on fire. The facility has backup generators, satellite phones, redundant water towers. But Angola is also built for containment, not survival. There are over 5,000 inmates and about 600 staff. When the digital systems failed, so did our scheduling, kitchen, and pharmacy logs. We had food for a week, maybe 10 days at ration. Water, longer. But medication, power for doors, manual overrides on hundreds of cells. The old-timers looked worried. By 1300 hours, we received our last outside transmission. A scrambled feed over the DHS band. A woman's voice reading off a national-level quarantine protocol and something about pathogen exposure. Keywords stuck out. Neurological symptoms, behavioral disintegration, civil collapse. We looked at each other and knew. We weren't guarding anyone anymore. We were stuck here with them. That night, Unit D had a breach. Not the wall, inside. One of the inmates, a man transferred from Orleans Parish just days before, turned violent in the shower block. Bit a guard. Wouldn't respond to tasers. Officers used non-lethal foam and riot control. Still kept coming. We locked the showers down and reported it to the infirmary, but it got worse. The bite turned septic fast. The officer, Blake, collapsed by 1700. He coded in the infirmary before sundown. I was posted in B-Tier that night. We locked down and doubled rotations. I kept a riot baton and vest with me, more out of nerves than protocol. Lights flickered. Noise levels across Gen Pop were spiking. Screaming, clanging metal. A few inmates started chanting. One scrawled something in blood on the inside of his door window. Couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. We assumed it was mass panic. We didn't know it had already begun. I tried calling my wife on the secure terminal. No response. She teaches at a school near St. Francisville. About 45 minutes by car. If things were breaking down there, I knew she'd be evacuating with her parents. I told myself she was okay. I told myself a lot of things that night. By 0200, we lost power to the admin wing. By 0400, medblock wasn't answering. The infirmary guard radios cut out. We had no medtechs, no backup staff. The last message from Central Tower said they were sealing the main entrance and keeping eyes on the fences. That was it. Angola was on its own. That morning, Saturday, I was rotated to assist with Unit C, where the infirmary is located. I walked there with Officer Maddox, a tall, quiet man who served in Afghanistan and didn't talk unless necessary. When we reached the hallway outside the med block, the lights were out, and the air smelled like bleach and rot. Maddox unlocked the steel barrier, and we moved in with flashlights drawn and safeties off. We weren't trained for war, but it felt like a war zone. Inside were 3 bodies, 1 inmate, 2 nurses, no signs of forced entry. All of them were torn open. The inmate's head was caved in, blood sprayed across the tiles in an arc. One nurse had bite wounds all over her arms. The other looked like she'd run for the door and never made it. Her ID tag read J. Lambert. I remembered her, soft-spoken. She gave out meds on B-Tier. Maddox checked for signs of life. Nothing. No movement. We radioed it in, no response. Then we heard something from behind the curtain. Metal dragging. A slow, scraping shuffle. Maddox signaled. I raised my flashlight. The figure that emerged wasn't like the others. It wore a jumpsuit, orange, torn across the chest, and its hands dragged like it couldn't lift them, skin discolored, mouth open, not wild, not fast, just slow, relentless. Its eyes had that glazed, milk-colored film I'd only seen once before, on a morgue cadaver during field training in Baton Rouge. Maddox warned it twice. No response. When it stepped toward him, he fired. The first round did nothing. The second hit center mass. No reaction. He fired again, this time to the head. It dropped. No scream, no flinch. Just silence after the shot. And still that bleach smell, undercut by something else now. Something older, fouler. We dragged the bodies behind the secured glass barrier and sealed it with a chain lock. I recorded the event in my personal notebook. We weren't logging anything officially anymore. The system was gone. I wrote down the time, 7:43. Maddox looked at me and said, "We need to arm up. These aren't riots." We returned to the equipment locker near admin, retrieved 2 Remington 870 shotguns and slugs, flashbangs, more cuffs. I saw Captain Ruiz carrying bolt cutters and an axe. Someone else had welded the armory door shut. Too many people panicking. Too few willing to take orders. There were rumors some guards had let their favorite inmates out. One officer was missing. Others were talking about staging an evacuation. There would be no evacuation. By noon, the Gen Pop wing was screaming again. Banging, stomping, voices yelling. "It's spreading!" I ran back to my post. B-Tier was still locked down, but Unit A, closest to the yard, was failing. One of the COs let a guy out to get to medical. He turned 5 minutes later. That's how fast it was now. We had no more illusions left. The inmates knew it. We knew it. There was no radio guidance, no sirens coming up the river, no reinforcements flying in from Baton Rouge or St. Francisville. Angola was on its own, and every locked cell we had was now a gamble. Were they infected yet, or just waiting to be? I stood at the upper tier, watching the catwalks and stairwells for movement. From where I was, I could see down through the central hallway that connected B-Tier to Unit A. The security gate between the two was still intact, sealed manually, but I saw shadows flicker past it. Not running, walking. That slow gliding pace, like they didn't care how long it took, just that it would happen eventually. One inmate inside B-Tier, a guy named Leon Greaves, started pounding on his plexiglass door and yelling, "They don't stop! They don't stop!" He wasn't wrong. The infected didn't pace, didn't sit, didn't get tired. They just kept going. I stopped correcting inmates at that point. Let them yell. Let them scream. Let them warn each other. We weren't maintaining order anymore. We were surviving. Officer Maddox came back from the yard gate by 1300, face slick with sweat, dirt on his sleeves. He'd gone to try and reach the maintenance trucks, but he said the yard was compromised. 2 inmates got free when Unit C fell, and both turned in the open space near the baseball field. One of the tower guards took shots but missed. Maddox said the infected crawled up the fence, bare hands, no tools, and ripped through the first layer of barbed coil like they didn't feel it. He said, "They're not scared of pain. They're not scared of anything." We held a quick meeting. 6 of us left in the secure wing. Ruiz, Maddox, Dewey, myself, and 2 younger officers from the education unit. We agreed to move all remaining COs into B-Tier and seal it from inside. It wasn't ideal, but B-Tier was the most secure wing, with independent power and a thick door originally designed to withstand riot explosives. It also had fewer inmates, only 16 cells, all single occupancy, isolation-grade steel and polycarbonate. We began a sweep. We locked down the remaining control stations, disabled the elevators, and barricaded access points to the tower stairwell. Ruiz had a stolen keycard override from Central and used it to disengage the armory seal. We retrieved 3 carbines, 2 more Remington shotguns, and a pair of .40 caliber service pistols. Ammunition was limited. 72 shotgun shells, about 150 rounds for the rifles. We distributed gear and wrote down allocations manually. That's how you know it was real, when you go from digital logs and protocols to scribbling names and counts on the back of a clipboard with a half-dead pen. I remember the ink smeared on my thumb and thinking how stupid that was to care about in that moment. We moved the last batch of essential supplies into B-Tier by 1700 hours. Bottled water, packaged food, first aid kits, flashlights, extra cuffs. I made sure to grab the fire axe from the stairwell box. It wasn't protocol gear, but it felt good to have something heavy in my hands. We sealed the tier and braced the entry with steel bars wedged through the inner handles. The surveillance feed in the control room was frozen, but the last frame before it went black showed motion in Unit C, figures staggering through the medical corridor, some of them still wearing orange, some no longer recognizable at all. That night was the worst. We kept the lights low. The backup generators were conserving charge, but the hum of the air system was still working. Dewey tried calling his wife again, using the emergency SAT terminal. Nothing. Static. Maddox sat near the end of the block, cross-legged, watching the entrance door. I heard him muttering something under his breath. Maybe a prayer, maybe not. Ruiz was sketching out a floor plan on the concrete with a piece of chalk, planning fallback positions in case we were breached. Around midnight, we heard the first breach alarm go off. Not ours, one of the old external motion sensors linked to the outer corridor. A red light flashed once on the security panel. Then the power flickered again. Seconds later, we heard pounding. Heavy, uncoordinated pounding on the metal. It wasn't a group. It was one. A single infected, smashing its fists against the sealed door to B-Tier. We watched it through the narrow glass slit, backlit by emergency hallway lights. A large man, skin grey, prison uniform soaked with something dark and dried. His hands were split open from pounding. Didn't stop. Just kept going, minute after minute, hour after hour. The next morning, we found 3 more out there with him. All pounding, all silent. None spoke. None growled. Just that dull, rhythmic thudding that echoed through the steel like distant drums. Greaves had gone quiet in his cell by then, just sitting on the edge of his cot, watching the door. I unlocked the food hatch and slid a ration pack through. He didn't move, just stared. I said, "Eat." He didn't blink, just replied, "They're waiting." And they were. We didn't understand what for. There was no strategy, no timing. They didn't react to sound, not the way you'd expect. They didn't run, but they lingered. They stood outside doors, like they knew we were on the other side, like they could sense us through steel and stone. One tried to crawl under a crash bar, ribs scraping concrete until he got stuck. Never screamed, never even struggled, just kept trying, inch by inch, even as his bones snapped from the pressure. We lost Officer Jennings the third day. He panicked during his watch and tried to open the emergency access panel, thinking he could reach the stairwell and climb to the roof. Ruiz tried to stop him. There was yelling, scuffling, and then Jennings slammed the override without the bolt in place. The inner door cracked open 2 inches. That was all it took. An arm slipped through, pale, bruised, fingers twitching. Maddox reacted first, smashed it with the butt of the shotgun until it snapped. The door sealed back. But Jennings was scratched. Not bitten. Scratched. We waited, watched him, tried to argue whether it counted. He swore he was fine. Told us to give him 12 hours. At hour 8, he stopped talking. By hour 9, he was pacing the edge of the barricade, murmuring something over and over again. Ruiz offered to cuff him. He laughed, then lunged. Maddox pulled the trigger before anyone else could. Just one shot. Clean. Nothing else to say. We wrapped the body in an emergency tarp and stored it in the staff kitchen closet. There was no place else to put him. Nobody cried. Nobody cursed. We just kept watching the door. The next morning, we ran out of power for the inner lights. The generator died sometime during the early hours. We switched to chemical glow sticks and flashlights. The air inside the tier was growing stale. The scrubbers weren't built for continuous operation without recharge. Ruiz said we had 2 more days before CO2 levels started to spike. He wasn't a scientist, but we believed him. We considered opening a crawl duct into the utility tunnels. Angola has old lines from the original construction, back when parts of the prison were built over the remains of former plantations. Some tunnels still connect admin to outbuildings and old work sheds near the farming fields. Problem was, those tunnels hadn't been inspected in decades, and if anything was waiting in them, we'd have no cover. But staying in B-Tier wasn't an option for long. We cracked the duct plate at the back of the laundry closet, welded shut on one side, but the lower panel had rust. Maddox and I took turns with a crowbar and the axe until we dislodged it. The tunnel behind was pitch black, 5 feet high, littered with dust and spider webs. We dropped a glow stick. It landed on concrete. No movement, no sounds. Maddox volunteered to go first. We didn't argue. He wanted it, needed it. He stepped inside and vanished into the dark. He didn't come back for 15 minutes. Then finally a voice from deep inside. It's clear, for now. We packed supplies into bags and prepared to move. One by one we helped Greaves out of his cell. He'd become more stable than some of the staff. Not much talking, but he followed orders. Knew the layout better than we did in some places. Said he'd worked the grounds detail for years. Ruiz was last out. He paused at the barricade and whispered something under his breath before stepping through. I didn't ask what. Maybe it was a prayer. Maybe just a goodbye. The crawl space behind the laundry closet was barely wider than my shoulders and coated with layers of dust, so thick it muffled our movements. I went second behind Maddox, dragging my duffel of rations and gear while trying not to choke on the stale air. We moved single file, Maddox, me, Greaves, Dewey, then Ruiz taking rear. Our lights cut narrow tunnels through the dark, the walls pressed in close, and the temperature dropped the deeper we went. Angola was built in stages over more than a century. These tunnels weren't on any of our modern maps. They were leftovers, service passages, old drainage routes, maybe even bootlegging lines from before the floodplain was tamed. Whatever they were, they still led somewhere. After about 30 meters, the crawl space opened slightly into a brick-lined corridor tall enough to stand in, just barely. There were rusted utility pipes overhead, some of them still dripping. Electrical conduits twisted along the ceiling, most dead. The floor was uneven concrete, damp in places but not flooded. Maddox signaled a halt and swept the beam of his light ahead. We waited, ears straining. Nothing but the creak of old metal and the occasional hiss of moisture hitting warm pipe. Then he stepped forward again, and we followed. We walked for close to 20 minutes before reaching a junction, one corridor curving upward at a slight incline, the other veering down into deeper dark. Greaves said the upward path might lead toward the old horticulture warehouse near the outer farms. That was our best bet. If we could reach the north field sheds, we might find transport. Angola had pickups and utility carts for farm work. At worst, we could find fuel and try to hotwire something. Nobody had high hopes, but we didn't speak them aloud. We turned up the incline and started ascending, single file again. The air grew heavier with each step. More mildew, less movement. At one point, Dewey slipped and hit his shoulder against the wall. The sound rang out, louder than it should have been. We froze, lights off, just silence. Long minutes passed before we moved again. We reached a hatch after nearly an hour. Steel bolted from inside, with a rusted wheel latch and faded red paint on the sides. Ruiz moved forward and tested the mechanism, frozen solid. It took all 5 of us working in turns, prying and turning, until it finally groaned loose and opened with a sharp metallic screech. We stepped into an old maintenance room, lit faintly by dust-choked skylights. Broken tools, moldy tarps, a fossilized vending machine in the corner. But there were stairs, cracked, narrow concrete steps that wound upward to what we assumed was the greenhouse level. Greaves went up first, said he'd worked this building 2 years ago, back when they still grew their own produce for Gen Pop. Said the top floor had a garage bay and an old truck used for compost runs. That was enough reason to check it. I followed next, one hand on the wall, the other gripping my sidearm. My shotgun was slung tight. Every creak underfoot felt like a warning. We came up inside a greenhouse corridor, shattered glass, ivy creeping in through the broken frame, old planters overturned, the soil long dried. Light poured in through the ceiling in wide golden shafts, dust spiraling like smoke. The truck was there, a white Chevy flatbed with faded Dioc markings, tires dry but intact, windows unbroken, no keys. Greaves ducked around the driver's side and popped the fuse panel, muttering to himself as he fiddled with wires. I kept watch. I didn't trust this silence. Angola had been loud for days, screams, shots, alarms. This quiet was heavier than any riot. It didn't last. Maddox spotted them first, through the glass wall facing the rear fields. 3 figures moving through the crops, then 6, then more. All walking, all slow. Their heads turned unnaturally, scanning without purpose. Some wore inmate blues, some were shirtless, sunburned, dragging limbs. A few had makeshift weapons hanging useless at their sides, clubs, sharpened sticks, pieces of broken pipe, leftovers from whatever happened out here. But they didn't run. They didn't even change direction when Greaves sparked the truck to life, and the engine coughed once, twice, then roared. They just turned toward the sound, every one of them, dozens now, and they started walking. "Drive," I said. Greaves slammed the door shut and the engine revved. We scrambled into the back. Ruiz and Maddox climbed in next to the stacked seed bins while Dewey jumped onto the side rail. The truck peeled out across the overgrown concrete lot, tires screaming as it bounced over cracked asphalt. I held onto the rail with one hand and aimed the shotgun with the other, watching the field to our left as the infected began to converge from every direction. We cleared the fence around the greenhouse yard and hit the dirt path toward the north gate. Angola is sprawling, some zones are miles apart, and the north road led to the forestry and fieldwork buildings, some of which had exterior access gates. If we could reach that, we could try to break out. But nothing was untouched anymore. The road was scattered with debris, fallen branches, old irrigation crates, broken pallets. Greaves swerved past them like he knew the terrain by heart. The truck groaned but held together. Then we hit the bodies, 3 of them, lying still in the middle of the path. dressed in guard uniforms. One of them, female, maybe early 40s, had a shotgun still clutched to her chest. We stopped. We had to. Greaves looked back at me for orders. "Stay in gear," I said. "Maddox, with me." We climbed down and approached. The bodies weren't moving, no sound. We kept our barrels low, fingers off triggers. Maddox crouched and tapped one on the shoulder. Nothing. Dead, but not infected. No bites, no rot. They'd been shot, execution style. 2 in the chest, 1 in the head. I looked closer at the badge on the woman. Officer Vera Landon. She worked in central processing. I'd shared lunch with her 4 days ago. Dewey checked the truck bed. They were heading out. Bags in the back, canned food, bottled water, meds. Someone caught them on the way. We didn't stay. I took the spare shells off Landon's vest, wiped the blood off the stock, and handed the shotgun to Ruiz. "We move, now." We pushed north again. The path narrowed near the back fields, hemmed in by old fencing and rusted tractors. That's when we hit the blockade. An overturned Deoc truck, tires shredded, the entire front cab burned. Behind it, a line of concertina wire, coiled and tangled like someone had tried to make a last stand. Greaves braked hard. This wasn't here a week ago. Maddox climbed over the wreck and scouted ahead. When he returned, his voice was low. "There's a break near the right. We can push through the fencing if we go single file." "Do it," Ruiz said. It took 10 minutes to cut the wire and widen the gap. We heard them again before we saw them. Those shuffling feet, the wet drag of limbs over gravel, the occasional grunt as one of them caught the scent of movement. They were close now. All around us, the fields alive with rot. We cleared the fence and emerged onto the old forestry trail, a dirt road that led east toward the facility's outer boundary. That gate hadn't been used in years, but it was manual, not electronic. Maddox gunned the engine, and we tore down the path, dust choking the air behind us. For a few minutes, we were free. Really free. The kind of open, desperate escape you see in movies but never think you'll live. Then we saw the smoke, thick, black, rising from the tree line ahead. We reached the gate and found it already open. The chain had been cut, the lock shattered, and beyond it, the woods were on fire. Not all of it, just a strip, maybe 50 meters wide, like someone had tried to burn the infected as they came through. But it hadn't worked. The trees were scorched, the ground still smoldering, and at the far edge of the blackened line, we saw them. Dozens more, silent, watching, just standing. They didn't rush. They didn't even close in. Some leaned forward as we passed, swaying like they were drawn to the vibration of the truck or the smell of life pouring out the exhaust. One of them had no lower jaw left, just a black socket where the throat used to be. It didn't make a sound. It just stared. Greaves kept his foot on the gas. The Chevy coughed a few times. Old fuel, maybe dirty lines, but it held together as we cleared the tree line and reached the old fire trail on the eastern edge of the property. We hadn't driven this route before. It wasn't on any modern service map, but Greaves insisted it connected to one of the parish roads near Tunica Hills. Back when Angola still ran timber harvests in the 80s, Doc used this trail to bring out cut loads. Now it was just a corridor of weeds, ruts and vines. The sun was starting to drop behind us. Long shadows cut across the path, stretching like black ropes between the trunks. We didn't stop talking, but we weren't saying much either. Dewey kept looking behind us, shotgun in his lap. Maddox sat up front with Greaves, quietly checking his last 2 magazines. Ruiz had the map from the admin office spread across his knees. I was in the back, behind the cab, watching the trail vanish in the rear view as the dust clouds swallowed it whole. Greaves asked how far I thought Baton Rouge was. I said 40 miles, give or take. But it didn't matter anymore. Cities were gone. Radio was silent. No coordinates, no rally points, no one coming. About 5 kilometers down, we saw the signs of another checkpoint. A couple of road flares melted into the mud. Scorched tire treads, shell casings, and then the vehicle. What was left of it? A sheriff's SUV, half submerged in a ditch, windshield punched out, blood on the steering column. The side panel had West Feliciana Parish, still barely legible through the soot. Doors were open. No gear left. Whoever had been there either fled or didn't make it far. Maddox checked the glove box but found nothing useful. Just a faded photo of a girl in a graduation cap. He tucked it back inside and said nothing. We pushed on. Eventually, the fire trail gave way to blacktop. Old, cracked, barely maintained. We passed a faded sign for Route 66 spur, the one that ran parallel to the Mississippi. That meant we were near the Tunica Tract Wildlife Management Area. We could try to cut east towards St. Francisville, or keep going north into open country. Either way, we'd have to refuel soon. The Chevy had a quarter tank left, maybe less with the weight we were carrying, and there was no guarantee of another working vehicle. We reached a rest area just past the river bend. Concrete picnic tables, rotted bulletin board with laminated trail maps, and a ranger shed half buried in vines. It was off-grid, remote enough that we figured it might be unlooted. Greaves pulled us up under the shade of a dying oak, and we spread out to check the perimeter. Ruiz and Maddox went to the shed. Dewey covered the woods. I took the trail path leading deeper into the pines, just to be sure nothing was circling us. The place was still. Not abandoned in the sense of collapse, but just forgotten. You could hear the frogs, even some birds. For a second, it almost felt like the world was normal. Then I caught a smell on the breeze. Sour, wet, faintly metallic. Not rot, not yet. But not natural either. I drew my sidearm and crept further up the trail. About 20 meters ahead, I found what had been a hunting blind. It was collapsed in on one side, the canvas torn and shredded. Blood soaked into the leaves below. Nearby, 2 spent shotgun shells and a half-eaten can of beans. No body. Just the signs of panic and maybe a final stand. I returned to the shed. Ruiz had forced the lock with a crowbar and was inside going through emergency supplies. A couple of field rations, unopened water bottles, a first aid tin. Better than nothing. Maddox had found a road atlas from 2019, and Dewey came back with a hand-cranked lantern and some spare batteries. We ate cold food that night, canned meat and crackers, then set up a watch rotation. One of us always stayed by the truck, engine idling in case we needed to run. The rest slept in shifts, sitting up against the cab or stretched out beneath the stars, weapons in arm's reach. In the middle of the night, I woke to the sound of leaves crunching. Not wind, not squirrels. Rhythmic, deliberate. I grabbed my shotgun and stood slowly, eyes scanning the tree line. 30 meters out, just beyond the reach of our lantern glow, I saw them. A cluster of figures, just standing there, watching, not moving in, not calling out, just standing. I counted 4, then 5, then 8, their outlines blurred by the pine trunks but unmistakable. I didn't wake the others, not yet. I just stood there until my shift ended, eyes locked on the trees, watching them watch us. And when Maddox came to relieve me, I pointed them out. He nodded once and said, "They're learning." We left at first light, didn't bother with another search, loaded up, packed what we could, and drove north along the parish road until we reached a crossroad with more signs of habitation. Burnt-out gas station, abandoned sedan, dead horse tied to a fence post, its ribs picked clean. That kind of thing stays with you, not because it's horrifying, but because it feels too quiet, like you walked into a moment frozen in collapse. Greaves said he knew a bypass that led to an old airstrip, abandoned since the early 2000s. Locals used to host drag races there, and someone might have left a vehicle or even fuel. We took his word and turned east, down a cracked road that eventually narrowed into gravel. After another 2 miles, we saw the runway. Long, empty. A cracked strip of asphalt disappearing into marsh grass. And near the far end, a hangar, its roof partially collapsed but still standing. We rolled in slow. No movement. No sound. Ruiz and Dewey stayed back while Maddox and I cleared the hangar. Inside, we found a 2-seat utility ATV with flat tires, a dusty generator, and a pile of rusted tools. But the real prize was in the corner, 4 jerry cans stacked against the wall, 3 still full. Greaves whooped when he saw them, ran a quick siphon test, and nodded. "It's clean." We refueled the truck, loaded the spare cans, decided to stay until dusk. There was a small loft above the hangar floor with a view of the tree line, and we took turns watching while the others slept. I kept thinking about those infected we saw in the woods, how they didn't rush, didn't scream, just watched, like they were waiting for us to do something first. Ruiz finally voiced it as the sun began to drop. "They're not chasing us anymore. They're herding us." It sounded ridiculous at first. Maddox even laughed under his breath, but then he stopped, thought about it, said, "Sheep don't need to be fast. They just need to know where the pen is." That stuck with me. We left the airstrip at dark, headed northeast toward Woodville, Mississippi. The bridge was still intact. No military presence, no quarantine signs, no survivors. We stopped on the hill before town and looked down at what used to be civilization. Fires still smoldering in distant houses. Cars abandoned mid-turn in intersections. A dog trotting across a strip mall parking lot, its leash dragging behind. No people, no movement. But we all felt it. Something was still there. We moved in cautiously, headlights off, crawling through the streets like we were back on patrol in a hostile sector. The town had that dead weight feeling, like it had collapsed inward without making a sound. Stoplights blinked yellow over deserted intersections. Storefronts were shattered, but not looted. No graffiti, no gang tags, just silence and the smell of burnt plastic and mildew. We parked near the post office and split into 2 teams. Ruiz and Greaves went for supplies, food, medicine, radio equipment, while I took Maddox and Dewey toward the hardware store on Main. The front door was shattered. A trail of dried blood arced across the welcome mat and into the aisles, vanishing behind a wall of toppled garden tools. We stepped over it in silence, scanning each shelf with short bursts of flashlight. I found a hand-crank shortwave set still sealed in a box. Dewey grabbed packets of seeds, canisters of iodine, duct tape, and a crowbar. Maddox stood by the door covering us, eyes scanning the shadows across the street. Then I heard him whisper, 1 o'clock, on the roof. I turned. A shape, human, hunched, squatted on the awning of the pharmacy across the road. It didn't move, didn't look at us, just crouched there, still as stone. Then slowly, it lowered itself down the side of the building using a broken gutter and began walking down the center of the street. Maddox raised his rifle. I grabbed his arm. "Wait." We watched it approach, slow, deliberate. It passed a rusted sedan, touched its hand to the window, leaving a smear of something dark, then kept walking. No deviation, no sound, just a direction. And it wasn't walking toward us, it was walking away. We left the store quietly and rejoined Ruiz and Greaves 2 blocks down. They'd found a working sedan, keys under the seat, half a tank of fuel. Inside the trunk were a pair of old rain ponchos, a road flare kit, and a binder full of campground permits dated 3 years back. We transferred the gas cans from the truck and decided to swap vehicles. The sedan would draw less attention, be easier to navigate through tighter roads, and used less fuel. We took everything we could carry, packed in fast, and rolled out of Woodville before first light. I never learned what happened to that town, whether the infected cleared it out, or if people simply fled. But I kept thinking about the one on the roof, the way it walked. Not like it was hunting, but like it had somewhere to be. It stayed with me. From Woodville we followed Highway 24 east toward Liberty. That stretch of road was littered with abandoned vehicles. At one point we had to push 2 wrecks into a ditch just to pass. A toppled school bus lay on its side near a church lot, windows blown out, interior smeared with old blood and handprints. No bodies, just the marks, the silence, the smell of rot cooked under glass. We didn't stop. We didn't look in. We just kept driving. About 30 minutes later, the radio cracked. It wasn't much, a burst of static, A faint voice, maybe male, maybe automated, repeating something in a loop. We killed the engine and cranked the signal manually. The voice was faint, distorted, but we caught fragments. Repeating emergency signal, shelter location, Meridian Civic Center, last broadcast, no military. We stared at each other. Meridian was over 100 miles northeast, near the Alabama border. That was a long way through no man's land, but it was the first coordinated broadcast we'd heard in days. Maddox voted yes immediately. Ruiz was cautious. Dewey didn't say much. He just loaded his rifle and nodded. Greaves leaned against the trunk and said, "Don't matter where we go, long as we go together." We aimed for Meridian. The next 2 days were a blur of back roads and detours. Bridges out, fuel stops scavenged to the bone. Once we crossed a barricade outside Macomb and found a burned-out refugee column. Dozens of vehicles torched, some still occupied. Whoever did it had stripped the plates, removed dog tags, anything that could be traced. We didn't speak about it, just drove past, windows up. We slept in a grain silo one night, just outside Brookhaven, took turns keeping watch. I kept the shotgun across my knees and listened to the wind through the vents above. In the distance, I thought I heard someone playing music, piano maybe, or maybe it was just my head filling in the silence. By the time we reached the outskirts of Meridian, it was clear the broadcast was long dead. The Civic Center was gutted. Roof collapsed, main hall burned, trucks overturned in the parking lot. A scrawled message was painted in white across the front wall. "Shelter failed. Stay out." We pulled in anyway. Ruiz and Maddox covered the doors while Dewey and I moved inside. It was worse than expected. The building had been hit hard. Blast marks near the emergency stairwells, bullet holes in the walls. The interior reeked of decay. We passed a stack of bodies, plastic wrapped, poorly sealed, gnawed at. Someone had tried to keep things organized. That didn't last. On the second floor, we found the radio room, door locked, reinforced. Greaves pried it open with a crowbar. Inside was a mess of gear, shortwave rigs, solar chargers, handwritten frequency logs. The battery indicators were still green. Maddox got to work scanning channels while the rest of us checked supplies. We found water, some antibiotics, 4 flares, a rusted revolver with 2 live rounds. Then the signal came again, clearer this time. A woman's voice, calm, recorded. "You are not alone. If you hear this, there is still time. Head north, past Tuscaloosa, Ridgepoint Relay. Bring nothing infected. Trust no one. Burn the bodies." We all stood there, frozen. Someone else was alive. Not just alive, but organized. Sending messages, using infrastructure. Ridgepoint was a broadcast relay tower in Alabama. I remembered it from dock safety seminars. It was remote, mountaintop relay, microwave uplinks. If someone had taken it over, they could see for miles, maybe even broadcast across multiple states. We voted to go. That night, as we slept in shifts inside the Civic Center, something changed. It was quiet, but different. The air was wrong, too still. I woke to find Maddox at the window, scanning the parking lot. He motioned to me. They were out there again. Dozens, silent, motionless, like statues in the mist. Not attacking, not calling out, just watching, as if they knew we were trying to leave, as if they were waiting for the wrong decision. We didn't fire, didn't move. We waited until first light and left through the back hall, slipping down the service ramp and into the next leg of the journey. We lost Ruiz 2 days later. It was a stop for fuel, a quiet one. Old mechanic station west of the state line, looked safe. We checked every room, every corner, nothing moved. But as we opened the tank on the buried pump, the floor gave out beneath him. Rotten wood, collapse. He fell 6 feet into a crawl space that had filled with runoff, and one of them was down there. Just one, half decomposed, no legs, just a torso and arms, dragging itself by instinct. It grabbed his leg and wouldn't let go. He didn't scream, just shouted, "Cover me!" Maddox and I pulled him out, shot the thing, crushed what was left, but the damage was done. We all saw the wound. He didn't ask us to wait. Just looked at me, nodded once, and walked off toward the woods alone. Didn't say where. Didn't want to be followed. Maddox offered him his sidearm. He refused. Took a flare instead. Said he'd light it when it was time. We never saw the light. By the time we reached the Alabama hills, it was just me, Maddox, Dewey, and Greaves. 4 men, 2 former guards, 1 inmate, and a quiet man who hadn't spoken much since we passed the burned convoy near Macomb. I think Dewey carried more weight than he ever let on. The relay tower came into view on the 3rd day, a white spire against the grey sky, still standing, still whole. We climbed the ridge on foot, through tangled trees and collapsed fence lines, and reached the access station at dusk. Solar panels glinted in the last light. The door was closed but unlocked. Inside, a woman waited, worn, armed, calm. She didn't flinch when we entered, just raised a hand and said, "If you're bitten, leave now. If not, you help me keep this going." Her name was Coulter, former FEMA logistics, turned rogue after the collapse. She'd secured the tower weeks ago and started broadcasting. Said she'd heard rumors of a colony out west. Said she was trying to reach them, keep hope alive. We stayed with her for a while, guarded the tower, learned the rhythms of the new world. Sometimes others came, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes we buried the ones who made it, sometimes we burned them. Eventually we stopped counting. I still don't know if there's an end to this. I don't know if there's a cure or a plan, or some bunker filled with scientists working night and day to undo what happened. But I know this. I survived Angola. I survived the breach. I walked through fire and silence and rot and watched the world go dim one piece at a time. And I'm still here. For now. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.